Beruchim Abayim Rabotai, welcome to another edition of our Thursday night class. Tonight we are studying Parashat Tetzaveh. Being that this year is a leap year, it gives us an opportunity to study Parashat Tetzaveh by itself. Usually the Parashiyot Teruman Tetzaveh are mehbarot, they're connected. And usually as Darshanim, we focus on the first parasha, and then by the time we get to the second parasha, there's usually not enough time. So this week, B'ezrat Hashem, we could put our focus on Tetzaveh, specifically on the last paragraph of the parasha, a subject that we never really paid too much attention to in our dirashot, and I think once and for all tonight we have to do the right job and analyze a most important subject. Ve'asita mizbeach miktar ketoret. One of the furnishings in the Mishkan was the mizbeach ha-ketoret, otherwise known as the mizbeach ha-zahav. Atzeh shitim ta'aseh oto. It was made out of acacia wood, which is a form of cedar wood. Amma orko. Its length was an amma, it's about 2 feet. Ve'amar ruchbo, by 2 feet wide. Rabu'a yihye, it was a square. Ve'amatayim komato, and it was about 4 feet high. So it wasn't a big mizbeach. Mimenu karnotav, and from the mizbeach itself you had 4 kiranot. The way they explained that is its horns, which means there were 4 corners that came out of the mizbeach on all 4 sides. V'tzipita oto zahav tahor. It was then plated in pure gold. Ve'asita lo zer zahav saviv. And on the base of the mizbeach there was a zer, which is a gold crown that was like a rim of the mizbeach itself. Ushte tabe'ot zahav ta'aseh lo. On the corners of the mizbeach there were 2 rings. The rings had in them the badim. Those were like poles, specifically used for transporting purposes. The Mishkan, you have to remember, was a mobile structure, and therefore when they would transport it, they needed a means to lift up the Mizbeach, so they would carry it by the poles. Of course, when they landed at their destination, they would take the poles out of the Mizbeach. The poles were also made out of acacia wood. They were also plated in gold. Where was this mizbeach placed? V'natata oto lifnei ha'parochet asher al aron ha'idut lifnei ha'kaporet asher la'idut asher alva'ed lecha shama. They note this mizbeach was in the inner chamber of the Mishkan. The ark, which was the aron, is in the innermost chamber called the Kodesh Kodashim, Kodesh Kadashim. And outside of that chamber, directly in front of the Aron, parallel to it, in the Kodesh, in the Holy, was the Mizbeach HaKetoret. Of course, it was separated by a curtain, so it wasn't actually looking at the Aron, but it was directly parallel. A direct line could be drawn from the Aron to the Mizbeach HaKetoret. And the Pasuk writes, V'iktir alav Aron ketoret samim. There was only one korban that was brought on this mizbeach. It's not even called the korban. It's called the ketoret. The incense, the spices. It was brought twice a day. Baboker behetivot hanerot yaktirena. It was brought, these spices, in the morning. Baboker means the first thing in the morning. That was the first service in the Beit HaMikdash. The Kohen would bring the morning ketoret, the morning incense. And only then, after that, he would clean the menorah. And then in the afternoon, when the Kohen would light the menorah, again he would bring the second installment of the daily ketoret. Ketoret tamid lifnei Hashem ledorotechem. The Ketoret is a tamid, it's a constant. 365 days a year, the Ketoret was brought on holidays, the Ketoret was brought on Shabbat, it was brought on Yamim Tovim, and specifically It was brought on Yom Kippurim, where we're going to learn on that day the Ketoret took on an added significance. It was not like the regular Ketoret of all year long, and that's what the last pasuk of the Parashat says, V'chiper Aaron al karnotav achat b'shana. Once a year, there was a special atonement on that Mizbeach, midam hatat kippurim. Of course, of the Korban of the Yom Kippur, its blood was sprinkled on that Mizbeach. So with your permission tonight, I'd like to analyze this subject that again is somewhat neglected, the anyan of the Ketoret and its spices and its purpose and its reasons and its institution and what it means to us today that we don't have a Mishkan. So does the Ketoret have any value for us? Bizman hazeh. I saw one of the rabbis right away point out the Cha'orah, seemingly the whole subject of the Mizbach HaKetoret is out of order. This is a furnishing. We discussed furnishings in last week's Parashat Terumah. We discussed the Aron, we discussed the Shulchan, we discussed the Mizbach HaNechoshet. And therefore, seemingly, it's out of place. Parashat Tetzaveh more talks about the clothes of the Kohanim, the Bigdei Kehunah. So something's out of order over here. So the Mefarshim come along and say a very sharp answer. That the holiest and the most significant furnishing in the Mishkan is the Mizbach HaKetoret. And therefore, Aharon Habib. The best for the last. Which means after you have everything in order, now we get to the Ikar. Now we get to one of the most important pieces, the Mizbach HaKetoret, and we end with that. As if to say, this is the main. And I want to note that the Midrash in our Parashat says, and I quote, it's the Midrash Tanchuma in Parashat Tetzaveh in Perek Tetvav, En bechol ha-korbanot haviv kemo ha-ketoret. There is no korban that is more endearing than the ketoret. Teda lecha. Shena'asa mishkan vechol kelav v'shachat et ha-korbanot ויקריב, וערך על המזבח, וסידר השולחן ואת המנורה, ואת הכל. ולא ירד השכינה עד שהקריבו את הקטורת. Which means when they finally activated the Mishkan, and they started bringing the sacrifice, and they set the table with the bread, and they lit the menorah, and they did all the services, Shekhinah did not come down until they activated the Ketoret. So you see the Ketoret is Keneged Kulam. And therefore it writes it at the end because it's in its league of its own. Rav Hida writes that there might be a lesson over here as well on a mystical level. Rav Hida writes, while it's very credible to study the Zohar and Kabbalistic teachings, but one must follow an order. First you must study the Pshat, and then the Remez, and then the Derash. There's an order. First you have to study the basics before you get to the esoteric. So he writes that the most esoteric of the services in the Mishkan was the Ketoret. Everything about the Ketoret is steeped in Kabbalah. The number of spices, the spices themselves, the way they brought it, the Kavanot. There's nothing, again, more mystical than the Ketoret itself. And that's why it's at the end. To teach us that mysticism is the last subject that one involves themselves in. Not like these vandals that have come along and opened up Kabbalah centers all over the country and giving out perfume and holy water and involved in scandals and stealing people's money and robbing them from whatever little faith they had. This is obviously a derision of the Kabbalah. It's a mockery of the Kabbalah, and it is nothing short than blasphemy. I want you to know there is nothing that they're doing in these Kabbalah centers that is connected even from a far distant relative to Kabbalah. I mean, you can call a football game Kabbalah also, which means you can call it whatever you want, but it has nothing to do. It is nothing yet short and scandalous, and these people are atid literet adin for taking one of the most holy subjects of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai and dragging it down and making a business in order to make profit from it. But that's for another class. Please don't get me started. In any event, we'll follow the Hidah's rule. Before we get into the mysticism, we have to go according to the Pshat. What do you need the Ketoret for? Well, what was it? Basically, it was 11 spices. We'll talk about it later. It was mixed up into a mixture, and they used to bring the spices on the Mizbeach every day. What do you need spices for in the Beit HaMikdash? So the Sefer HaChinuch in the 103rd mitzvah writes, Mishorshei mitzvah, Gam ken lehagdil kevod habayit. It brings honor to the Beit HaMikdash. V'liyot ma'alato u'morao al penei kol adam. So he explains that Reyach HaKetoret hayeh hatov she'efshar la'asot al yedei adam. Which means the smell of the Ketoret was very, very fragrant. It was very aromatic. The Gemara says that when they used to bring the Ketoret, you used to be able to smell it from Jerusalem all the way to Yericho, to Jericho. It's miles away. The Gemara says that if there was a Kala in Jerusalem getting married, she would not have to wear perfume on the day of her wedding because already she had the fragrance of the Ketoret on her. As well as the Izim, the goats of one of the rabbis, the rabbi testified, the Gemara Yomah, used to sneeze from the smell of the Ketoret, even though he lived all the way in Jericho. So you see, it was a very potent smell that emanated from the temple. And you're walking into the house and you smell a very, very fragrant reyach. It brings kavod to the house. It means you're in the Shekinah's house, almost as if you walk into the great palaces of the kings. So they have all flowers and different spices in order to keep everything smelling good. So in order that the house of God shouldn't be less than the house of a mortal human being, so that we have to keep it smelling in a proper way. A simple pshat. The Rambam has a different pshat in his Moreh Nevuchim. The Rambam writes that the Beit HaMikdash obviously had a lot of sacrifice, a lot of meat. So he writes, we don't want the Beit HaMikdash to smell like a slaughterhouse. And people are going to come in now and it smells like a butcher. You have blood and meat, things like that. So in order to preserve the dignity again of the temple, the Ketoret has to be twice a day in order to neutralize any malodorous smells that come from the sacrifices themselves. Good. But there is something even deeper than that. What exactly the Ketoret symbolizes? The Zohar tells a story of Rav Aha. The Rav Aha came to a certain place, and it seems there was an epidemic, a contagious epidemic, and people were dying every day, and there was no way to stop it. So they begged Rav Aha, please do something. So Rav Aha said, fine, let's go to the synagogue and we'll make a Yom Tefillah. On the way to the synagogue, he saw people were dying left and right. People was getting sick. Rav Aha said, we have no time to go to the synagogue. The plague is in full force. We have to do something much quicker. We have to take another method. So he says, bring to me 40 men of the most hashuvim and religious people of the city. He got them together and he sent them to the 4 corners of the city, 10 on each corner. And he told them to recite the Parashat the Ketoret 3 times. And after they recited the Parashat the Ketoret 3 times, they came back to Rav Aha. Rav Aha went to the hospital where all the sick patients were, the ones that didn't die yet, the ones that the doctors gave up hope, and he read the following 3 Pesukim from Parashat Korach. The Pasuk he read was, ויקח אהרון כאשר דיבר משה וירץ לתוך הקהל והנה החל הנגב פעם וייתן את הקטורת ויכפר על העם ויעמוד בין המתים ובין החיים ותעצר המגפה. He read a Parashat Korah. What was the story in Korah? After the whole rebellion where Korah and his cohorts were swallowed underneath the ground, the Jewish people started to complain against Moshe. You killed the nation of God. What are you doing? What did you do to Korah? And a plague ensued. And there was many casualties in the plague. But what happened? How did the plague stop? Aharon brought the Ketoret. This was not the regular Ketoret, it was a special Ketoret specifically to stop the plague, and it worked. So Rabbi learned from this Parashat that the Ketoret has very, very special qualities. It's able to stave off the Malach HaMavet. It's almost a neutralizing agent where the angel of death cannot fight against it. And sure enough, after Rabbi set the Ketoret in motion at the four corners of the city, people stopped dying and those that were sick got better. He changed the name of that city. Originally the name of the city was Kfar Tarshaya. He renamed the city to a famous city that we read about in the Gemara, Matam Mahsaya. Mahsaya in Aramaic means Rahmanut. The place of Rahmanut. He nicknamed it that because this was the place where we saw the hand of God have compassion and atone on its inhabitants. He subsequently made the whole town make teshuvah, and everybody lived happily ever after. So we see already a new subject here. Yes, the Ketoret has its smell, has its fragrance, very nice, Bet HaMikdash, people walk in, they're impressed, but now already we see it's actually a potent antidote against the Malach HaMavet himself. The Gemara on Shabbat, on Daf Petit, tells us that when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shamayim to get the Torah, every angel gave him a Hidush. Every angel gave him a Divrei Torah, including the Malach HaMavet. And what was the Divrei Torah that the Malach HaMavet gave him? Says the Gemara, Sod HaKetoret. He gave him the secret of the Ketoret. He told him, listen, I'm not allergic to anything. The Malach HaMavet is immune to everything, but he said there's one thing that I'm not able to contend against, and that's the Ketoret. If you want to get me, you say the Ketoret. So the Gemara says, it had to be that the Malach HaMavet gave him this information. Ask the great Kabbalist Arizal. How do you know? Who said the Malach HaMavet gave it to him? Maybe somebody else tipped him off. How do you know the Malach HaMavet gave it to him? So he writes a klal. Since the Malach HaMavet cannot exist in the face of the Ketoret, God would never give over that information because it would hurt the Malach HaMavet. Which means God created the angels. He's not going to give over information to a human being that can damage one of his creations. So therefore we're forced to say that the Malach HaMavet gave permission, you can give it over. Now, don't ask me why the Malach HaMavet would give over this secret to Moshe Rabbeinu. It seems that Moshe was such a towering figure that even the Malach HaMavet humbled himself in front of Moshe and said, listen, you gotta know, in the time of crisis, when I have my sword out and there's plagues, God forbid, if you say the Ketoret, you'll be able to overcome it. And that's a fact. But I'd like to explain to you how it works for a moment. The Mizbeach that the Ketoret was brought on is called the Mizbach HaKetoret. Mizbeach is actually a altar where you bring sacrifices. Lizboach is to slaughter an animal. Ask Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. You don't slaughter any animals on the Mizbeach of the Ketoret. Why is it called Mizbeach HaKetoret? There's no slaughtering. You know what he answered? There is slaughtering. You know who you're slaughtering? The Malach HaMavet, the Mekatregim, the Shedim, which means by bringing those spices on the Mizbeach, there's a massive slaughtering taking place, and there's nothing that's able to ward the Satan away like the Ketoret. And therefore it's a very powerful incense, and that's why the Ketoret has ramifications to the modern day. Ketoret tamid lifnei Hashem ledorotechem. The Ketoret applies tamid, even for the generations. That means today, God forbid, halakha brings down, if there's a plague in a city, you should take the advice of Rabbi. Go to the corners of the city and read the Ketoret 3 times. Go to the hospital and say the Ketoret. Read the Ketoret in the synagogue at a special venue. The power of the Ketoret is still viable. But I want to explain a little how it works, if I may. The word Ketoret in Aramaic, kitra is a knot, is to tie something. The Hachamim of Kabbalah tell us that there are 2 names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's the name Yudke Vavke, which is the name of mercy, Havaya, and there's the name Elohim, which is a strict judgment. We always like to attach ourselves, obviously, to Rahamim, to mercy, and we're scared of, obviously, judgment. But there's something that's even higher than Rahamim. There's something that's even higher than God's mercy, and that's when you're able to take the judgment and you're able to sweeten the judgment. That's already a higher level of Rahamim. Again, you have sugar sweet. You have maror is bitter. It's a no-brainer. You want the sugar, not the maror. But if you could make the maror sweet, this is called mituka dinin. That's the highest level of rahmanut. For example, Havaya is 26, Yudke Vavke. Adanut, 65. Adanut is judgment. Aleph, Dalet, Nun, and Yud, it's Dinah. Dinah de Malkuta, Dinah, that's strict judgment. However, if you put them together, the Havaya and the Adanut, mix them together, now you sweeten the judgment, this is already considered the highest level. Incidentally, Havaya is 26, Adanut is 65, when you put them together it becomes 91. This is called the mituk of the Adanut, which is the highest madriga. That's why, for example, Elohim is judgment. Elohim equals 86. We want to keep away from the judgment. Then how come we say on Yom Kippur and the high holidays, Adonai hu ha-Elohim, Adonai hu ha-Elohim? I thought Elohim is judgment. What do we want to refer on judgment on the high holidays? And the explanation, we're not saying Elohim, we're saying ha-Elohim. It's a big difference. Ha-Elohim is the hair we're adding. That's 86 plus 5 is 91. That's already the Havaya Adanut. That already is the Inyan of the Mituk Adinim. The hair makes the whole difference in the world. There's a big difference between Elohim and Ha-Elohim. There's the difference between Din and Rahamim. And therefore the Zohar writes that when one says the Ketoret, he's actually tying the Midat Adin to the Midat Rahamim. Actually, to be specific, he's taking the Shem Havaya and the Shem Elohim, and he's putting it together. And that's why the holy books bring down, and I quote to you, in Sefer Devarim, when it talks about the Ketoret, it says, Yasimu Ketorah be'apecha. Yasimu Ketorah, they will place the Ketoret be'apecha in your nostrils. The Ketoret goes up to God. Says the Arizal, Yasimu Ketorah be'apecha is Rashi Tevot, Yud Kof Bet. Yud Kof Bet, Yabok, equals 112, which is the numerical value of Havaya and Elohim. Yasimu Ketorah be'apecha. The Ketoret puts the Yud Kevavke with the Elohim. Yasimu Ketorah be'apecha, Yabok. It connects them. And therefore it creates the most potent Rahamim that's available. Rav Chaim Palachi brings down, for that reason, that every Jew should actually write for himself on parchment the Parashat of the Ketoret and have it with him and recite it every single day from the parchment itself, written in Ktav Ashuri. This is something that's brought down by many of the Hachamim. And specifically he says that besides all the other benefits of saying the Ketoret on a daily basis, according to the Arizal, one is supposed to say the Ketoret at least 3 times a day. Twice in the morning, one before Baruch She'amar, one before Alinu L'Shabayach, and one before Minha. But he says, besides all that, it's a Sigula for Osher. Parnasa. Hey, now you're talking. Hey, Rabbi, wait. Why did you say that 25 minutes ago? What are you mixing us up with all this Kabbalah? That's it. Now it was worth it to come to the class. You got to add that to the book of Sigulot for Parnasa. Add that to the list. Rabbi Yaakov Emden once said, it's a shame that Lo Tignob is not a minhag. That's also a Sigula for Parnasa. Lo Tignob. That's too hard. Give me, read the Ketoret. That's much easier. In any event, that's why the Gemara says they used to give every day another Kohen a chance to bring the Ketoret. Because it's a valuable item. They want to, as they say, share the wealth. So every day another Kohen would bring the Ketoret in order to... So reading the Ketoret itself, we have a tradition. When you read the Parashat of the Korban, it's just like you brought the Korban. Today we don't have Ketoret. But the closest way to bring it is to say it. Unshalema parim sefatenu. There are 11 spices in the Ketoret, as we're going to see immediately. Halakha. If you miss one of the spices, chayav mitah. It's that serious. For that reason, Ashkenazim don't say Ketoret. Why? The Rama brings down, because they were worried that when they're going to pray the Ketoret, especially in the shuls where we pray everything quickly, they might skip one of the spices. They might go 10 for 11. 10 for 11, you're a Hall of Famer in baseball. But in Ketoret, you hayav mitah. So therefore, they don't say the Ketoret for that reason. Unbelievable. What do I get from that? That they really believe that it's like you're bringing it. It's not a joke. So much so that we don't want you to miss one because you could be liable because of verbally misrepresenting the Ketoret. For that reason, I saw brought down a very important insight. The Ben Ish Chai says, as well as the Chaim Palachi, for that reason you should count the Ketoret with your hands. When you're listing the 11 spices, Hasurim, Hasiporim, Halbenah, Halibona, count them. Use your fingers to count. Number 1, most people know how to count to 11. So you'll be able to make sure that you get to 11. Number 2, he says, by getting your fingers involved, you're actively bringing the Ketoret. It's not only your verbal, you're getting your body involved in the process. It is a mahloket between the Ben Ish Chai and Rav Chaim Palachi, which hands you're supposed to use to count the Ketoret. According to the Ben Ish Chai, you're only supposed to use your right hand. So when you get to 5, you go back again and count again. Rav Chaim Palachi says, no, you get both your hands involved. 5, then 5, and go back to the right hand. Okay, more kedeitle. I've seen rabbis do both. But it's proper to count the hashbon of the Ketoret. But the Ben Ish Chai brings down in Od Yosef Chai the following. We have a prerequisite before we say the Ketoret. We say it like this, and I quote. You came, good night. Now you're going to learn something. Atau Hashem Elokeinu shektiru avotenu lefanecha Ketoret tesamim bezman shebedash kayam. You are the God that they brought the Ketoret when the time of the Beit HaMikdash was around. Ka'ashir sivita otam ayad Moshe leviat kekatuv betoratach, like it's written in the Torah. Asks a great rabbi called Nodav Yehuda. He says, what is this introductory paragraph before we read the Ketoret? You are the God, the commander of the Ketoret, as it's written in the Torah. By all the other sacrifices that we read in the prayers, we read a prerequisite line. Now that there's no Beit HaMikdash, let this be as if we brought it. But when it comes to the Ketoret, we don't say that. We just say, this is the Ketoret as it's written in the Torah. How come we don't say, and please consider it as if we brought it? Says the Nodav Yehuda, and the Ben Ish Chai brings it as well, because we don't want to say that it should be counted as if we brought it, because if we miss a word, we don't want to be held liable. So it's like an insurance. Which means if we get it right, God will put it in the right spots for us. But if we get it wrong, hey, we didn't say it's, we don't want it to count. We just said as it's written in the Torah. So it's like a lawyer wrote the Ketoret over here for us over here to make sure that we can't be held accountable in Shamayim, but if we do it right, at least we'll get the proper credit. The Rabbi Yehuda further said, in the morning in Sha'arit, before the Ketoret, we have a custom to read the En Kelohenu. There's nobody like God. En Kelohenu, En Kadonenu, Mi Kelohenu, Mi Kadonenu. Noden Elohenu. Why? Why should that be a prerequisite to the Ketoret? So he says, because since the Ketoret makes people rich, what happens usually when people become rich? They forget God. Kohi ve'otzim yadi. Already the money goes to their head. They forget. When they were poor, Shavat Aniyim atat tishma. But we never heard Shavat Ashirim. Once a person becomes rich, he doesn't need God anymore. Now already he's giving God advice. God, you should run the world like this. You shouldn't have done that. He forgets how needy he was. And therefore, before you read the Ketoret, you have to bolster your faith. En Kelohenu. Now I can have money. God, I trust you. I believe you. I love you. Baruch Elohenu. I bless you. Okay, now I'm ready to accept the wealth of the Ketoret. With your permission tonight, I'd like to just go through some of the interpretations of the Ketoret itself. And Be'ezat Hashem, just a simple pshat of the words. The Ba'alam Noez brings down the word Ketoret is Lashetevot, Kiddusha, Tahara, Rahmanut, Tikva. Which is by reading it, it brings Kiddusha to the person, it brings purity, it brings mercy to the world, as well as hope. So let us begin. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Kach lecha samim. It's pasuk in the Torah. Take for yourself spices. In modern Hebrew, samim today means drugs. So I once saw unfortunately, a young drug addict that used to be a yeshiva boy. So I thought, what are you doing to yourself? You're destroying your life. He said, what are you talking about? It's a mitzvat asem in the Torah. Kach lecha samim. I told you must be on drugs right now when you're telling me this Hiddush as well. Kach lecha samim. Take for yourself spices. Nataf, ushchelet, v'chelbena, samim, ulbona zakah, bad bebad yihiyeh. Oh, this is a whole subject in itself. Take for yourself spices. The Torah tells us what spices you're supposed to take. Nataf. What is nataf? Nataf is like the sap that comes out of the tree. Maybe they call the tree the parsemon. It's like a balsam. Ushchelet. Shchelet is another fragrant spice that has a smell to it. You want to see what they call it? I can give you the actual word. Shchelet is siporin. Maybe they call it today cloves. Vehelbena. Helbena happens to be a spice that smells terrible. Out of all the 11 spices, we wonder why Helbena made it to the Ketoret. If it's supposed to be such an aromatic situation, Helbena is terrible. You can't smell the Helbena. So the Gemara says, why did you put it in the Ketoret? So the rabbis teach us that from here you learn that even the Risha'im and even the Jew that might not be so observant, when he joins Klal Yisrael in service, you have to accept him. Even the Halbena is part of the Ketoret. You're not supposed to ostracize anybody. Somebody wants to come back to Yehadut, okay, it's the Halbena, you're in with us. That's why on Leil Kippur, before we pray, we say, Anu matirim le'tpalel im ha'avaryanim. We're now going to allow even to pray with the sinners. Because we don't know who comes to Shul on Kippur. You have even Ma'alil Shabbat. They're coming once a year, you're with us. There's a story told of a very religious rabbi and his students. They had 9 men. They needed a tent for the minyan. So one of these Halbena guys walked in. Ma'alil Shabbat, whatever he was. So he's number 10. So the rabbi tells the Hazan, wait, don't start. So the guy got all offended. He said, what are you talking, Rabbi? Isn't the Halbena part of the Ketoret? He says, that's why there was 11 spices. In any event, In any event, the Torah only lists Natav, Shchelet, Vehilbena, and then it lists a fourth one called Libona Zakah. Pure Libona. Now what does it mean, pure Libona? So the Mefarshim explain that that's also a certain sap that comes out of the tree. There's two ways of extracting the sap out of the tree. Either you could put like a filter to catch it, or you let it land on the floor and then you pick it up. Libona Zakah means pure without any sediments of earth, meaning use the filter to catch it from the tree. Libona Zakah. So this is a problem now, because we know there's 11 spices in the Ketoret, but the Torah only lists 4. Side point, according to the Arizal, the most significant spice in the whole Ketoret is the Libona Zakah. That represents the highest mystical levels of the Kabbalah. And he lists each spice represents another sphere of Kedusha. So how do we get from 4 spices, 11? So listen to the way the Gemara says. Kach lecha samim. How much is samim? Plural. How much is plural? Minimum plurality is 2. So you have 2. Kach lecha samim. Nataf, ushhelet, behalbena. How many we have so far? 5. And then what's the next word? Samim. It says samim again. Well, how many samim do we have until that point? 5. So samim now is another 5. You have 10 now. Ulbuna zakah, that's 11. Where do we know the names of the other spices? From Moshe Rabbeinu, we brought it down from Sinai. Which means without the Gemara, you don't know the ingredients of the Ketoret. The Gemara Yomah says that there was one family specifically that were experts at making the Ketoret. They were called the Aptinas family. They had the recipe, they knew exactly how to mix it up, and they died with the recipe, which means they had the black book exactly how to prepare it. Bad bebad yihiyeh. These 4 spices, you're going to place the exact same measurement of each spice, as we're going to see. 4 spices, you put the same ratio. Ladies, you're not in the cookbook, they tell you put 2 cups of this and 1 cup of that. So these 4 spices, it's all the same measurement. We'll see what the measurement is. Bad bebad yihiyeh. Ve'asita ota ketoret rokach. Rokach means you mix it. Ma'aser okeyach. Today in modern Hebrew, a mirkahat is a pharmacy. Why do they call a mirkahat a pharmacy? If you see on the emblem of a pharmacy, you see the mortar and the pestle. Because the olden days, how did they make the medicines? They would grind it, they would mix it. So mirkahat, ma'aser okeyach. It's mixed. Memulah Tahor Kodesh. Now what does this mean, Memulah? So the word Memulah Tahor Kodesh is, according to some of the Mefarshim, Memulah from the Lashon Melach. Salt. Hachamim tell us one of the ingredients in the Ketoret was salt. Why? Because we have an upstanding rule. On every korban that's brought in the Beit HaMikdash, you have to have salt. That's the salt rule. They weren't worried about high blood pressure in the Beit HaMikdash or all the other things. They had salt. Al kol korbanecha takriv melach. So memulah, it was mixed with salt. The Hachamim, specifically Katahim Palachi writes, Memulah Tahor Kodesh, if you take the last letters of Memulah Tahor Kodesh, it's Rashi Tevot Resh Het Shin. This Kavanah, Resh Het Shin, Yesh Po Koach Legaresh HaChitzonim, has the ability, when you think of this Rashi Tevot, to scare away any external forces. V'yo'il Zechira, and it's good for the memory. Like the Pasuk says in Tehillim, Rahash libi davar tov. So a person has a problem with his memory, you have that kavanah. Memulah, tahor, kodesh, sofet evot, resh, het, shin, for memory. And for what? For getting rid of the hitzonim. That doesn't work against your mother-in-law, incidentally. Somebody wanted to know that. There's different hitzonim. We're talking about the spiritual hitzonim. The question was asked by the Mefarshim. Why does the Torah only list these three spices, or at least this first three, nataf, shehelet, and helbena? Why are these mentioned in the Torah? Why did they get top billing? I mean, you could list any of the 11. The Torah chose these specifically. Why? So listen to an explanation. I think this goes to the essence of how Ketoret is able to fight off the Malach HaMavet. It all started in Gan Eden, when Chava listened to the seduction of the Nahash, of the snake. And the Torah tells us, not only did she listen, but her eyes saw the fruit. Vatikah, she took it. She had sensory pleasure. She actually took the fruit. And she ate it. All the senses were involved in committing the sin, which eventually brought death to the world. But the only sense that wasn't affected was the sense of smell. And therefore the sense of smell remained pure. Hence the sense of smell is immune from the Malach HaMavet. Therefore the Torah writes, Nataf, Shehelet, Helbena, Otiyot, Nahash. To remind us that it is these spices specifically, and the Ketoret, which is the inyan of the Reyah, which has the ability to ward off the Hitzonim. Side point. This is a long subject. We could talk a lot on this. I'm just going to give you a path, and then you'll continue down this path. I'm just going to give you a tidbit now. In a normal year, we'd be celebrating Purim next week. Because of the leap year, we have now Purim Katan, so we'll say something in honor of Purim Katan. Haman is one of these Hitzonim that we're talking about. One of these external forces that you need to ward off. Isn't it interesting? Mordechai, as read in the Targum, his name is Mared Dachya, or Morderor. Morderor is a spice. It's a fragrant spice. Esther's nickname was Hadassah. Hadassah is a fragrant. So you see, the players of Megillat Esther, Mordechai and Esther, both of their names, Morderor and Hadassah, have the power of the Reyah. The Reyah is able to push away the inyan of the Hitzonim like Haman. That's a tidbit. You can talk already a lot on this Mahalach. Look at the Bnei Yisachar, he has a whole arichut on this. But back to our point, I wanted to say over the Pshatim over here. So the Pasuk says, B'shachakta mimena hadek. Now that you have all the spices, you have to grind them. V'natata mimena lifnei ha'idut bo'ohel moed, asher iva'ed lecha shama. And you should place it, lifnei ha'idut, in front of the ark. Be'ohel moed. Well, make up your mind. In front of the ark or in Ohel Moed? Says the Ramban, it's talking about 2 different days of the year. Lifnei ha'idut on Yom Kippur. That's when you go into the Holy of Holies and you bring the special Ketoret. But all year round, Be'ohel Moed. In the Holy, where the Mizbach HaKetoret is. Ketoret tamid lifnei Hashem ledorotechem. Now we read the Gemara. Now we come to the enjoyable part. Tanu Rabbanan, we have a Braita. I don't think we ever did this in this venue. We're going to study a Braita tonight. Pituma Ketoret Ketzad. How do you make the Ketoret? Shelosh me'ot v'shishim u'shmana manim miyubaha. There were 368 parts of the Ketoret. Shelosh me'ot v'shishim b'hamisha k'minyan yimot ha'chama. 365 parts correspond to the days of the solar year. 365 days. Maneh b'chol yom. Ma'asito b'boker u'ma'asito ba'erev. Which means, when they would make the whole compilation of the Ketoret altogether, if you measured it, it comes out to 368 parts. You say, how is that possible? I'll explain to you in 1 minute. It's a very simple calculation. But that's the ingredients. Altogether, it's 368 parts. What do you do with these parts? You take one a day. One measure. Maneh. You half it. Mahasito ba'boker. Umahasito ba'erev. That means the first thing the Kohen Gadol did when he woke up in the morning, he took half the Ketoret, put it on the Mizbah Ketoret. Smoke. Then he lit the menorah. Then he cleaned the menorah. In the afternoon, before he lit the menorah, takes the other half. Good. So at the end of 365 days, you're left now with 3 more parts, because there was 368 parts to the Ketoret. What did they do with the extra 3 parts? Ushlosha manim yeterim. The extra 3 parts, shemehem machnis kohen gadol venotel mem meloch ofnat b'yom kippurim. What do they do on Yom Kippur? Besides the daily Ketoret, there was a Yom Kippur Ketoret. The Kohen Gadol would come on Yom Kippur and with his palms, he would scoop up from the remaining 3 manim, and he would bring it into the Holy of Holies, and he would put it on the shovel that had coals on it, and all of a sudden the entire Holy of Holies was filled with smoke. Why was that necessary? Because God himself would come down into the Holy of Holies on Kippur, and it's not proper for the Kohen Gadol to see the Shekhinah, so he needs to create a smoke screen. That is the holiest service of the year. It is the most difficult service of the year. Kohanim Gedolim would have to practice it, and they'd have to, have dress rehearsals, exactly because Chas v'Shalom, if he makes one mistake on the Ketoret, the whole process is compromised. And the Jews would pray that the Kohen Gadol should succeed. So that Ketoret was from the remnants, the 3 parts that were left over. Now, something is special about the Ketoret of Yom Kippur, where there's a special mitzvah that the Ketoret is ground. Before they bring the Ketoret, they used to grind it. But on Yom Kippur, they had to grind it a second time. It had to be extra ground. That's what the Pasuk says, or the Midrash, the Beraita says, Umahaziran lemachteshet be'erev Yom Kippurim. They would take the 3 remaining parts back into the grinder on Erev Kippur, kedei lekayem mitzvat daka min hadaka. So you're following so far. 365, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. The 3 left over, there was a mound. The Kohen scoops it up, but before he scooped it up on Erev Kippur, they put the 3 back into the grinder, to grind it again, so it was extra fine, and then he would bring it on Kippur. And now we'd list the spices. Elu hen hasori, v'hasiporen, v'ha'helbena, v'ha'lebona. Anybody interested in grammar for a minute? We have a rule. Anytime there's a he in front of a word, it's called he ha'yedi'ah. He ha'yedi'ah means it's the known one. The one that's famous. Hasori. The sori. Ha-siporen. Ha-helbena. Ha-lebona. What's famous about these 4 spices? These are the 4 that are written in the Torah. Remember we read the Pasuk a minute ago? Ka'lecha samim nataf, ushchelet, v'halbena, samim ulbona zakah. Since those are the 4 that are written in the Torah, when we read it in the Braita, there's the hair. The sori, the sipor, the one that's mentioned in the Torah. Mishkal, shiv'im maneh. Good. How many parts do you put from each one of those? 70 parts. So when you looked at the cookbook, Hasori, take 70 parts of sori. Siporim, 70 parts of sipori. Helbena, 70 parts. Lebona, 70 parts. How much parts you have so far? 70 times 4, 280. Who's going to keep Hezbon over here? Not keep Hezbon first. 280. More is another spice. Uksi'ah, v'shibolet nerd, it's like a rose, v'charkom, it's saffron. So those, how many more? We lift 1, 2, 3, 4 more spices. Mishkal, shisha asar maneh. 16 measures of each one of those 4 spices. 16 times 4? 64. Plus 280? 344 so far. Okay? We're not there yet. Now we get to a very important word in the Ketoret. Again, for you grammarians. I'm going to say it the way I read it. That's the way Hacham Avadia reads the word, and that's the way Rabbi Mansour reads the word. Then I'll tell you all the other options. Kost, shenem asar. Kost is a spice. Now you want to know the other ways of reading it? Some read it kosht, not borscht, kosht. And some read it hakosht. So let's go and say why those are inaccurate. Number one, you can't say hakosht because it's not written in the Torah. It's not one of the famous ones. Only the 4 that are mentioned in the Torah get the hair yediyah. So the hair doesn't belong. Kosht sounds like the Aramaic word kosht keshot or aite keshot. Kosht means emet, the truth. Although the Ketoret was nothing but the truth, but that wasn't an ingredient. Hence, the more proper way is to read it kost. Okay. See, nobody arguing me. Nobody really cares too much either way. Fine. Shenem asar. 12. Where are we holding, boys? 344 plus 12? 356. We're not there yet. That's a lunar calendar, but we need a solar calendar. Kilufa shilosha. Kilufa was like a bark. The bark of a certain tree that has a fragrance, they used to peel it off. Kilufa. How many parts? Shilosha. 359? Yeah. Okay, continue. Kinnamon. It's like cinnamon. Tisha. 368. There you go. We're done. That's how you got the 368 parts of the Ketoret. Now you know the recipe. I don't think it's in the deal cookbook. They put the Ketoret, but it wouldn't be a bad idea. But the truth is, you're not allowed to make it. You're not allowed to make it at home. And you really wouldn't be able to make it accurately because some of these spices, we really don't know where to find them. Now the Braita tells us, once you have the 368 and you mix it all up, there's other ingredients that are needed as auxiliaries. For example, borit karshina. What is borit? Borit is soap. Soap that comes from karshina, a place. Tisha kabin, you need 9 kabin of soap. What do you need the soap for exactly? Yen kafrisin, you need wine from Capri. Se'in telat v'kabin telata. You also need a certain measure of that. V'im lo matzah yen kafrisin. If you can't find the red wine from Capri, mevi hamar hivar atik. You can bring old white wine. What's going on over here? Maybe we'll see. Melach sedomit roba. That's the salt. Roba, a small measure. Ma'ale ashan kolshehu. What is ma'ale ashan? There was a certain herb. Only the Abtinas family knew about this herb. The herb's name was called ma'ale ashan. Lehavdir. I'm going to give you a very, very silly example, just so I can explain it to you. Remember when you were young, you used to have on Purim smoke bombs. That's not ma'ale ashan. But the smoke bomb, you lit it, and all of a sudden the whole room would be filled with smoke. What the ma'ale ashan herb did is when you would put it in the Ketoret, it would create a smoke, and the smoke would be a straight smoke. Normally when somebody smokes, the smoke goes all over the place. This ma'ale ashan was a certain herb that not only made it smoky, but it went straight up. Rabbi Natana Babli Omer, Af Kippata Yarden Kolchi. They also put a drop of Kippata Yarden. That's also an herb. Im Natan Badevash, oh, Pesala. No honey in the Ketoret. I don't know why yet. Vim Hiser Ahat Mekov Samamanea. You miss one. Hayab Mita. Mita means karet. Now the Mishnah continues. The Braita continues. Wow. Endless. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Hasori, what is Sori? Eno ela sheraf, it's sap. Hanotef, that drips out of Atzei Ketaf, the Ketaf tree. Borit Karshina lemahi ba'a. What do we need the soap for? Kedei leshapot ba et hatziporen kedei sheteheh na'a. One of the spices was siporin. Siporin is cloves. In order to get the smell out of the cloves, you needed really first to clean it, because it comes out of the ground black. So it's not nice to put them in the Ketoret black. So first you needed a detergent to clean the spice. So the Borit Karshina, the soap, is actually to clean one of the spices. Look how detailed it was. Yen Kafrisinu Baba, what did you need the wine for? Kedei lishrot po et hasiporin, to soak the siporin. Kedei sheteh azat, to make it strong, because to get the smell out of the siporin, you need to soak it in red wine. V'halo meraglayin yafina. So the Gemara asks, what are you talking? You want to get the smell to come out of the siporin? We have a better recipe. Meraglayim. Chutz bekavod sibur. Meraglayim is urine. If you soak it in meraglayim, it does a better job. So the Gemara concedes, you're right. But you know why we don't want to soak it in meraglayim? Ela she'em machnisim meraglayim b'mikdash b'pnei kavod. It's not respectful. You're going to bring meraglayim now and use it as a astringent or whatever you call it. It's not respectful. Therefore, we rather use the wine. One of the rabbis in the Gemara says that meraglayim over here is not referring to urine. Meraglayim is referring to a certain spring that they had in Jerusalem, and the name of the spring was Meraglayim, and that water was very good to soak the siporin. So why don't you use the water of that spring? Because it shares the same name as Meraglayim, which is urine, and therefore wouldn't be proper to bring even a water that's called Meraglayim, because it's not kavod to bring it into the Beit HaMikdash. Tanya, we have a braita, Rabbi Natan Omer. Listen to this braita. Kishehu shochek, when the Kohen is grinding the Ketoret, Omer, he says, Hadek heteb, heteb hadek. He says those words as he's grinding. Hadek, hetev, hetev, hadek. Why? Mipnei shehakol yafeh lebesamim. What does that mean? Because the sound is good for the besamim. This is what the Gemara is telling us here. Gemara says in the Gemara like this. Speaking is not good for wine, but it's good for spices. It means when you're making wine, for all you people that have wineries and you make homemade wine, you got to know a rule. Don't talk so much in the cellar. Wine doesn't react good to talk. Klal. I have a rabbi. His father-in-law makes wine. One of the batches of the wine went sour. Very innocently, the rabbi said, the wine went sour. We talk too much. Which means that we win the cellar. Hakol is not good for yayin. But kol, sound is good for besamim. It does something to the, I don't know what it does to the besamim exactly. But just to be a fact, when you're grinding, you're talking. Like people talk to their plants. So you talk to the besamim, it does something to the besamim. Now you're going to laugh what I'm going to tell you. This has been proven already. I read an article recently of a very expensive cream that's sold by one of the cosmetic companies. Maybe it's $250 an ounce. And why is it so expensive? Because they have already a new technology, which already has been proven by the professors from Harvard and all the important Anashim Hashuvim, that what? Sound therapy. When they're making the cosmetic, they have certain sounds that are playing in the background, and they can scientifically prove that when the sounds are being played, something happens chemically to the composition. Hazak Baruch, professor from Harvard, you're 3,000 years late. We knew this already. Hazak Baruch. The 2-year-old that goes to the Cheder knows this already. You had to spend 50 years analyzing. We could have told you, you could have saved you, you could have went to the Kollel instead of wasting your time for 50 years to figure that out. But nonetheless, specifically those words, Hadek Hetev, because the rabbis explain, we're concerned that when he's grinding, it's amazing how technical it is. When he's grinding, what's going to happen? Maybe some of the spices are going to go into his throat. We don't want him to be damaged by ingesting the Ketoret. He's grinding, the particles. So what does he do the whole time? Hadek, hatev, hatev. He's saying a word that automatically forces him to exhale. So any Ketoret that will get stuck in his throat will automatically be exhaled out. What a detail that they have. Rabotai, what does this mean to us over here? I'm sad to say that most people are not careful on the Ketoret. They come into the Tefillah, they start from Ashrei, that's it, they go right into the Amidah. Ketoret, that's for the old man. Ketoret is just there, to give you 5 more minutes to talk until you get to Ashrei. For whatever reason, they put it in the Tefillah. But really, as we're learning tonight, there's nothing as great as the power of the Ketoret. You talk about overcoming the Malach HaMavet. We finally figured out the weapon that's able to neutralize him. And the recitation of it is the closest thing you'll have to bringing it. And therefore, really I'm talking to myself now, we have to remind ourselves not to skip the Ketoret. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, in Zohar, if the people would know how precious the Ketoret is, that's what he says, they'd go and they'd buy a golden crown, and they would place a golden crown over each letter. You hear this? I don't know how much today a golden crown is. It's got to be expensive. Gold today is almost $1,000 an ounce. And he says if you'd know the value, you'd buy a crown, not one crown, a crown for every letter of the Ketoret, because of its potency, because of its level, because of its severity, how great it is. And therefore, Rabotai, it's not enough to read these Parashot in the Torah, but when we come to the Tefillah, come 2 minutes early in Shachrit. Read it from the Sidur. I'm not selling Ketorets, but go to the Jewish bookstore and buy the Ketoret on a parchment. You do yourself a favor. Hachamim bring down somebody sick, go to the hospital, read the Ketoret in front of them. Somebody has issues, read the Ketoret is a cure-all. It's a secret that stops plagues, that heals sick people, that brings parnasah. It has so much value, and we said it's good for memory, it's able to ward off chitzonim, and therefore everybody should really recommit themselves to the tradition that we have of saying the Ketoret. And then Be'ezat Hashem, the day will come where we'll be able to have not a verbal Ketoret, we'll be able to have the actual Ketoret itself when the Beit HaMikdash is reinstituted. Then we'll have Be'ezat Hashem Kohanim ba'avodatam. The Kohanim will go back to the service of making the recipe of the 368 parts. We'll have Be'ezat Hashem the Anana Ketoret of Yom Kippurim as well. And then Be'ezat Hashem will be able to reap all the benefits, including smelling it from Yericho. We'll be able to walk on the streets of Jerusalem and inhale the aroma of the Ketoret. And that's why we say at the end of the Ketoret, Ve'areba l'Adonai minchat Yehudah V'Yerushalayim ki me'olam u'kshanim kedmoniyot. We reminisce at the end of the Ketoret, please God, bring us that Ve'areba, that sweetness of the Ketoret, u'kshanim kedmoniyot, like it was in the olden days. But God should restore this to us, and Be'ezat Hashem will be fulfilled on us the pasuk that says Yasimu Ketoret be'apecha b'chalil al mizbechecha, which is followed by Barech Adonai Elo ufo'al yadav tirseh. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen. Amen.